Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review comes from Bulgaria from 2012, and it's Sofia'S Last Ambulance, which isn't a film about Francis Coppola's daughter's favourite emergency service. This is a documentary by Ilyan Metev, 4 years in the making. It's 77 minutes long, and it's a wonderful documentary about an ambulance crew in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, which has about 1.7 million people, but they only have 13 ambulances. Again, this is 2012, so I don't know what's changed in the last 12 years. But this is a wonderful documentary. This is on second run DVD. Doesn't have a Blu-ray, but second run DVDs are always wonderful quality anyway. But what makes this film well worth watching is it's not shot in a very, pardon the pun, ambulance chasing way. It's not an adrenaline-filled thrill ride. It's very non-sensational. There is an interview with Metev and his sound recordist on the disc as well, and he talks about his choices of shooting and why he made those choices, including not showing any graphic material, not showing people bleeding in the streets and things like that, not showing people that are passed out, and he's just focusing on two medics and their driver of a ambulance crew. He put kind of dash cams in their faces in their ambulance, which is basically just a transit van, as they go from call to call. Again, as I said, 4 years in the making, and by putting the camera essentially just on these three people's faces, you get to know them and you're focused on them and their reactions to what they see, rather than the patients or the families of the patients or the blood and guts which you might get in other documentaries about the ambulance service. So these three have their own sense of humour, which is important as a defence mechanism, because there's times where they turn up and they actually find a corpse rather than somebody who needs an ambulance, somebody who needs a morgue, with their face half eaten by worms. But again, Metev doesn't show us that. It's just it leaves everything to our imagination. We do hear the voices of family members and patients. These are three people stretched to the limit. The scenes where the dispatch service goes down for half an hour, they talk about getting hundreds of calls in a shift. I think they all smoke, or at least 2 out of the 3 smoke. They do not look glamorous in any way. Again, this is a completely anti-glamorous depiction of health service workers. Along with cop shows, it's ambulance shows or ER shows are obviously very popular in television, because we probably like to see people suffering, and we like to see people trying to get them out of suffering. But again, in this film, there's people They come across drug addicts who promise to change, but as we know, that's easier said than done. They come across people whose families have phoned for an ambulance, basically just to give them a lift to the hospital. They don't actually need an ambulance, which is also very frustrating for the ambulance crew. They turn up to addresses and nobody answers. They go to calls where they're threatened to be beaten up. But again, what keeps them doing it is their need to, well, one, make a living, and two, actually to help people, even though some of their conversations talk about how easy it is to hate human beings. They have conversations about serial killers and all manner of things. There is lots of black humour, but again, Metev kind of talks about trying to get that balance. In some of the cuts he made of the film, there was too much humour, and then other ones were just so depressing and not enough humour. The last images of the film are actually quite moving and wants you to ask more questions. As I said, it's 77 minutes long, but you kind of like these three characters, and you'd quite happily spend longer in their presence. I mean, I don't know how much footage you actually shot over 4 years, but it could almost be a Spinal Tap sort of scenario where there's another hour of footage that could have easily been included. But what's there is absolutely fantastic. It's depressing and bleak, but again, there's some black comedy. Like, they pick up a guy who was walking along the highway and not surprisingly got hit by a car, and he may be a little bit inebriated, and one of the doctors is in the back, and she's trying to get him to sit still. She's trying to set his leg and keeps telling him, if you move and get up, the bone's going to come right through your leg. But meanwhile, they're on a road with lots of potholes, which is a common theme in the film. And it is fairly comic while he's moving about and trying to get up. She's saying stay still, meanwhile they're going over all these potholes. But again, it also brings up that argument about documentary film, about how the makers shouldn't interfere, because while the cameraman is like there watching what's happening and the guy keeps trying to get up and she keeps trying to say, would you lie down, you do just want the cameraman to grab the guy and push him down, but of course you can't interfere with what's going on. Plus it's quite hard for the cameraman to stay focused, if you're pardon the pun, with all the potholes. They get lost on calls because they're out in the middle of nowhere. There's a lovely bit where one of the doctors gets out and grabs some fruit off a tree so they can have something to eat. It's a completely honest and, as I said, completely non-sensational. There's a moment where they turn up too late, and the family of the now deceased say, we called like 4 hours ago and you've just arrived. But again, it's shot, they're not, the cameras aren't in the house, so we just hear the conversation, and again the difficulty that they have to bear, and the kind of abuse that they have to take for just a system that doesn't really work. And again, they're doing their best and persevering under difficult conditions. There's conversations about how many people have quit and given up, and As I said, there's only 13 crews at this point anyway. When this was released in 2012, there's only 13 ambulances in Sofia for just under round about 2 million people. So you can imagine, but because, as I said, because he chooses just to focus on the crew's faces and not distract the viewer with blood and guts and patients crying over family members and stuff like that, it really focuses the viewer into these people as human beings, and why do they do this, why do they put themselves through this. The female doctor is more expressive and open and wears her heart on her sleeve about things. They get a call about a woman who tried to give herself a homemade abortion, who are in a car on the way to the hospital but they've run out of fuel. The male doctor is more measured and more kind of philosophical, and then the driver has a bit more of a black sense of humour, and he does drive a little bit fast. There's a funny scene where the female doctor is basically hanging on to the inside of the van while he races through the streets. Yeah, I mean, the one criticism of the film I would say is it is too short. You do want to spend more time with these people. Because they're kind of people that deserve to have more time spent on them. But all in all, it's a wonderful little film. But as I said, I don't know whether the situation in Sofia and Bulgaria has improved, and whether they have more ambulances now, and whether they've sorted any of the potholes that seem to be on every single road that the ambulance goes on. Yeah, it's highly recommended. It's a really good documentary. He has made a few other shorts. One of his shorts is included on the second run DVD, along with, as I said, his sound recordist Tom Kirk have a chat along with the filmmaker about the film itself. And as always with second run, there's a nice booklet included, and again there's a Q&A from Cannes with the director and the editor's thoughts on the film as well. Yeah, so another fascinating second run release. You can pick this up on eBay fairly cheaply if you've got an eye for a bargain, and I would highly recommend it. So thanks very much for watching a random review of Sofia'S Last Ambulance. Please let me know if you've seen it, or if you know whether they've got more than 13 ambulances now in the capital of Bulgaria, and hope you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.